Buckle up, Hollywood. It's about to get rough because Netflix has won the bidding war for Warner Brothers Discovery, arguably the worst possible outcome in this deal. It could have been Paramount. It could have been Comcast. Hell, there may have been some other players behind the scenes trying to get engaged, but frankly, no surprise, Netflix came out with the largest bid, and we'll explain why here. Certainly, it's the best of times and the worst of times. And if you're really nervous about Netflix taking over Warner Brothers, I hear you. But if you're also not wanting Netflix to take over Warner Brothers, then you probably should be kind of happy today. I know. You don't get it. But that's why we're here. We've been putting Hollywood through the business and financial lens of reality for nearly 5 years. And nothing's changing today. Sit back. Let's get into it. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see all of you out there once again. And of course, if you are like one of the many watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Make sure to join us every Sunday and Wednesday evening right here for the live show on Valiant Renegade, and make sure you're tuned in especially for this Sunday's live show on December 7th, because we will be covering this topic in far greater detail. So over much angst and consternation in the last few months, we've finally got what appears to be an answer, at least for now, with Netflix and Warner Brothers and Paramount and fill in the blanks. Now, I've told you before that I was thinking that Comcast, honestly, was arguably the best suitor for Warner Brothers Discovery. But at the same time, Comcast was not in a financial position, I didn't think, to give David Zaslav what he was looking for. Enter the Ellison family, specifically David, son of Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle. Billionaire dude, right? We all thought when he got Skydance that might be the end of it, but no. There was another step he was wanting to take. And the timing was rather perfect, considering Warner Brothers had just exited its 3-year holding period following that Reverse Morris Trust spinoff back in 2022, where the new sheriff in town, David Zaslav, took over. And we were very celebratory of David Zaslav coming in to shake things up. Go back and watch the video of that we did back in 2022. Nothing has changed. Zaslav, love him or hate him as a Hollywood guy, is a very, very brilliant business genius, and we're going to explain why nothing is changing here. Now, that being said, Netflix does not have an easy road to roll down right now. This is not going to be a simple hill to climb. But let's go to Netflix's own press release here from just the other day. Netflix to acquire Warner Brothers following the separation of Discovery Global for a total enterprise value of $82 billion and equity value of 72. Netflix's offer was nearly $28 per share, more than what David Ellison was able to come up with. But one of the key components here is that Netflix is only looking to walk away with the core pieces of Warner Brothers Discovery, the money machines. In other words, they don't want the linear broadcast side. What Netflix is looking to pay top dollar, a premium for, a big premium, if you will, is going to be the slate of Warner Brothers intellectual properties, the film and television studios themselves, and of course, HBO Max. And it is that last component that is going to be a real, complete pain in the butt for Netflix to get through federal regulatory bodies like the Federal Trade Commission with. The cash and stock transaction, as per Netflix, is valued at $27.75 per Warner Brothers Discovery share, subject to a collar as detailed below, with a total enterprise value of approximately $82.7 billion, equity of 72. The transaction is expected to close after the previously announced separation of Warner Brothers Global Networks division, Discovery Global, into a new publicly traded company, which is now expected to be completed in Q3 of 2026. In other words, this proposed transaction, the takeover, is not even expected for at least another year at this point in time. Now, I want everybody to go back and remember what I talked about probably almost 2, maybe 3 years ago now, shortly after Zaslav came in. There was a little wrinkle out there that had HBO Max consolidating a lot of the Discovery assets into it to be a singular login point, much like what Disney is now doing with Hulu. But there was still effectively a separate Discovery service. And I told everybody back then that was David Zaslav leaving himself an exit, a way out the door for a potential future sale. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. Because the linear assets are not going to go to Netflix. The cable channels, including, I would presume, HBO itself, along with all the other assets like CNN or TBS that fall under the Warner Brothers umbrella, including other Discovery assets that Zaslav brought in when they did the merger with Warner Brothers in the first place. Basically, it sounds like that if David Zaslav wants to, he's going to be able to walk out the door with almost everything, including more than he walked in the door with AT&T back in 2022, with an additional huge pile of cash in his pocket. And we're going to talk about what David Zaslav stands to make from this deal. Look right here from Puck Magazine. They did a great breakdown about 6 months ago now. Meanwhile, when Zaslav announced this very split that Netflix is waiting for the conclusion of before they take possession, if granted permission by federal regulatory bodies, the WBD board granted David Zaslav roughly, get ready for it, 24 million options with a strike of $10.16 per share. Now, these options have time limits, right? He can't exercise them the next day. He's got to wait. And usually with these things, oftentimes we see about a 1-year holding period for these kind of CEOs. I want you to think for a second here what this entails right now. Because with David Zaslav getting 24 million stock options, that's a lot of money. Now, people often don't understand how stock options work. Imagine right now, though, if Netflix were to write a check over for $28 per share of Warner Brothers Discovery. And if you're David Zaslav, you have 24 million options. That means you have the ability to exercise the purchase of a share of Warner Brothers stock 24 million times at the strike. The strike is $10.16 a share. What's the current market value if Netflix is willing to pay 28? Well, it's going to be 28. That means that David Zaslav will be able to turn around at 9:01 a.m., for example, and buy 24 million shares at $10.16 a share, and then at 9:02, turn around and sell them for 28 million. That means that if this deal goes through and the timing of these exercises on these options holds up, which I suspect they certainly will, that means that David Zaslav, if the Netflix bid wins out, is going to walk home with over $430 million in additional cash. It's a hell of a deal and a hell of a run for 3 years as CEO of one of the most storied Hollywood studios in history. And that doesn't even include the Discovery and linear assets that will still be spun off that David Zaslav theoretically could still retain a great deal of control and revenue from. It's incredible. When I told you this guy was the smartest man on the planet in Hollywood a few years ago, I wasn't lying.
But wait, there's more.
By the way, if anybody was thinking that with a sale, it was going to have an impact, an adverse impact on David Zaslav's ability to either retain, become vested in, and of course, and most especially, exercise those options, ta-da, it ain't. But here's the kicker. Forget for a moment what we're hearing from Hollywood right now. In a lot of our friends that cover the entertainment and pop culture space out there on YouTube. Most of what they're saying, I think, is totally right. This is a very, very bad day for Hollywood. It's a bad day for filmmaking. And this is going to be one of the rare occasions where members from places like SAG-AFTRA or the WGA, the Writers Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, the Directors Guild, the PGA, the Producers Guild out there, all the Hollywood bigwigs and the major Hollywood unions, and people like me, incredibly, are actually going to be on the same side of this debate. Because Netflix consuming somebody like Warner Brothers is a huge level of risk. And forget from the economy and the business side of things, looking at it just from the standpoint of Netflix's MO is to put movies on streaming and bypass traditional theatrical exhibition. You guys know me. I'm a huge fan of theatrical exhibition. I fight for it. I've argued for it for 5 years. And Netflix, as much respect, tremendous amount of respect as I have for Netflix and Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters and all the boys and girls over there, for the business model they have built from a pure business perspective, and they have done an amazing job. The fact of the matter is, they need to stay in their lane. They've built things that otherwise may never have gone to the big screen. And granted, they have consumed a great many things that otherwise would have. However, they are a good player in the industry. And from a business standpoint, they've done a really good job of enormously expanding their profitability, their overall operating income, their EBITDA, and of course, their gross revenues are insane. We've talked about it many times here. When it comes to an entertainment industry player, there is Netflix and then there is everybody else from a money line. And what I mean by that is Netflix is generating nearly the same amount of EBITDA each and every year as the Walt Disney Company is. And all Netflix is a streaming service. They're generating nearly $12 billion a year in EBITDA, the same as Disney, which includes theme parks, cruise ships, a massive swath of hotels all over the world, even ESPN, live sports, linear assets, and yes, Disney Plus and Hulu. It's incredible. Netflix stands alone in this regard, and that's what's going to stop them from being able to complete this deal. Everybody knows that Donald Trump was incredibly specific and direct in his very Donald Trump way, suggesting several weeks ago that, quite frankly, Paramount Skydance was the only player on the board that was going to have a fairly easy track passing through a federal regulatory environment to make this deal happen with Warner Brothers. And again, whether you love Trump or you hate him, take out for a moment the fact that we all know that Donald Trump and the Ellisons have long been compatriots, right? Larry Ellison is a Trump guy. Larry Ellison is a Republican. And David, by all accounts, is an extension of that. This isn't just about Donald Trump giving a little bit of gravitas to his friends here to make this deal happen. From a pure regulatory standpoint, if you throw the friendship out, it still makes the most sense, and here's why. Just do a quick Google search of the largest streaming companies out there. This is from Digital Trends, and I deliberately randomly grabbed one of the first things that popped up on a Google search because I promise you this is exactly the core of what federal regulators, particularly the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, is going to look at. Now, remember, there's no FCC involvement here. There's no federal communication involvement here because neither of these two parties exercises any type of OTA or over-the-air broadcast license. Even if Paramount Skydance had come in and successfully won the bid for Warner Brothers, the FCC ostensibly still would not have been involved because there was no transfer of a broadcast license. Warner Brothers only operates cable assets and streaming assets and film and television studios. They do not operate a CBS, an ABC, an NBC, or a Fox, for example. So from a regulatory standpoint, half the battle is already won. But from a federal trade and antitrust standpoint, this is where things are going to get really, really murky, really, really fast. And Netflix is probably thrilled having an entire year before Warner Brothers closes the deal to spin off the linear assets before this proposed deal from Netflix for the purchase of Warner Brothers even gets to remotely go into effect, because it's going to take a hell of a lot of time and, quite frankly, tens of millions of dollars, if not more, maybe $100 million in attorney's fees to get this through federal compliance. Take a look at digital trends here. The 10 most popular streaming services ranked by subscriber count. And look, there's a lot of ways that we can rank streaming services like this. Subscriber count is but one of the simplest and oftentimes the most publicly available metric. However, total consumption, watch time, for example, where people are keeping their eyeballs, whether it's Hulu or Disney Plus or Netflix or YouTube or Amazon Prime, we can go on and on and on. But in terms of traditional streaming services, not including Google/YouTube, because that's a totally different animal than everybody else, looking at this by subscriber count is probably going to be something that the federal regulators are going to be most keyed in on. And let me show you exactly why Netflix is going to have a big problem. Let's start here with the number 5 position, because the rest of it, frankly, doesn't matter, at least yet. Disney at 127 million, or Disney Plus, I should say. And then there's HBO Max at 128 million. Yes, again, HBO Max is actually bigger than Disney Plus. And if we bring in the element of where the eyeballs sit the most in terms of watch time, I promise you HBO Max blows Disney Plus right out of the water. Number 3 is Amazon Prime. Now, again, we always put an asterisk next to Amazon Prime. They have a huge caveat because, let's be honest, most of the 200 million subscribers are not there for the video service. The vast majority of them have been there long before there was a video service, and they're using them, like me, to get the free 2-day shipping for Amazon Prime. I think, quite frankly, federal regulators, while there is going to be a big argument from Netflix and Warner Brothers citing Amazon Prime before the FTC, it should largely get thrown out the window. Then there's Jio Hotstar, which is India. So we're not talking about an American streaming service here. Moving on. Number 1, no surprise, is Netflix at over 300 million. Now, again, this has been updated since then. We now know that Netflix stands at closer to 320 to 330 million subscribers as per, I believe, their last public earnings call that we covered. So if you throw out Amazon Prime, which isn't really 200 million subscribers, and you throw out Hotstar, which isn't even American and doesn't operate in America, you now have, in the eyes of the Federal Trade Commission, the number 1 streaming service in the country, consuming the number 2 streaming service in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a big old red flag to the hell no. Now, don't get me wrong. Netflix did not put out this press release and make this offer in a vacuum. They did not do this in some type of void. Netflix absolutely has a legal plan to make their case, to make their argument to the Federal Trade Commission when the time comes. And the time may come sooner than later. I suspect we'll begin having hearings on this sometime maybe around the second quarter of next year, if not sooner. The issue here is that, can Netflix convince the federal regulators that this is all kosher? I have a lot of doubts. And, of course, Larry Ellison and David Ellison, really David Ellison, the guy who is running Skydance and Paramount right now, has already put out a memo to shareholders to say, hey, hold tight, because we have our doubts that this deal is going to actually go through. We are still in the hunt. Now, let me show you exactly why I think that Donald Trump correctly pointed out in an unbiased fashion why Paramount has a much easier road to consuming Warner Brothers, even if they left the linear assets on the side of the road like Netflix is doing and simply took the film studios and, most importantly, the streaming service. So again, Netflix at number 1 with 300 million. Again, HBO Max at number 4 with 128 million subscribers. Throwing out Disney Plus for a second. Then, here's Paramount Plus. So what you're saying is In the case of the David Ellison offer with merging streaming services, we're going to take the number 8 and the number 2. Traditionally, when it comes to antitrust and anti-competitive practices and the scrutiny of the Federal Trade Commission here in the United States, mergers of numbers 1 and 2 usually cause pucker factors somewhere near DEFCON 1. When you have a number 2 and a number 8 in the same play, or even if you threw out the other ones, a number 2 and a number 4 or number 5, depending on how the numbers shake out, that is much easier to pass muster. Again, Netflix, in addition to this, is a nearly $500 billion market cap company. They're larger than Disney and Comcast combined. Netflix is larger than Comcast, Warner Brothers, and Paramount combined, the other players in this entire merger proposal. This is one of those situations where definitively, yes, ladies, size does matter. I get it. And this is exactly the type of Wall Street metric that the FTC is going to be looking at, and why I am skeptical, very skeptical, as a matter of fact, that this Netflix proposition is going to be able to hold water all the way to the end to a successful outcome, at least successful in the mind of Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters, the co-CEOs of Netflix. By the way, check out Peacock with 41 million subscribers. This is part of what I was talking about. If you had Paramount and Peacock put together, and maybe there was some overlap or a good bit of overlap, again, this probably would have passed muster much more easily than a Netflix, even with Comcast being a sizable company. In terms of market cap, almost the same size as Walt Disney. But Comcast primarily relies upon linear services, things like cable subscriptions, broadband internet subscriptions, and now cell phones. Theme parks and film studios are actually a tiny portion of what drives the revenues and the EBITDA of Peacock. And Paramount would have fit right in there very, very well without much ado. The reality is, however, that Comcast was probably unlikely out of the 3 suitors that have stepped up. They were probably the most unlikely to be able to make the most lucrative offer because Comcast is dealing with their own financial issues, as many others in their space have been with cord cutting the last several years. You guys out there in the audience, let me know what you think. Do you think Netflix is actually going to be able to pull this off? I have my serious doubts. Their size, their scope, their scale, everything about this is a little questionable. And no, as much as it pains me to agree on the merits with somebody like Elizabeth Warren and her comments recently, who are in concurrence with the Trump administration, if you can believe it, she is right in this case. There is something a little scary about Netflix diving in here just on the mere numbers of it. Forget the implications for Hollywood. Forget the implications for theatrical exhibition. Just from a pure number standpoint, this is something that usually the FTC tends to shy away from. And there's still, I believe, going to be a lot of people in that realm. They're going to be looking back at that Disney and Fox deal still with some regret on that, even though Fox was in a much different position. Fox at the time was having financial difficulties. One cannot say the same so much to Warner Brothers and Netflix at this point in time. These are 2 fairly healthy companies, and one of which, Warner Brothers, is leading the box office right now. Overall, they're the biggest movie studio at the box office so far this year, at least until Avatar drops, but still nothing to shake a stick at. What are federal regulators going to do with this? You guys let me know. We'll talk more about this on the Sunday show, 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Valiant Renegade. Hope to see you there. Take care. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.